The cage rises through impossible architecture, a black seed ascending through a forest of knives. Its occupants press against bars that weep substances darker than rust, while galleries of pale observers lean forward with predatory interest, their eyes reflecting captured starlight as they taste the terror radiating from within. The cage follows no natural law as it climbs through twisted spires where stolen fragments of murdered worlds have been welded together by necessity and dark matter engineering. Faces in the terraces part their mouths. Fear spills from the transport like condensation, beading along railings where tongues touch metal. In Commorragh, terror does not go to waste. It is harvested, portioned, invoiced. The city accepts this offering with mechanical grace. Veins of light pulse as galleries open, ducts yawn, and the whine of elevators threads the air like suppressed laughter. Behind every decorative archway lies a valve, a gauge, a clock. What these captives feel will be recorded in 1,000 ritual ledgers by 1,000 clean hands, then routed where it is needed most. Commorragh represents perhaps the most successful solution to extinction ever devised, a civilization that has made cruelty into infrastructure, transforming suffering into survival through systematic conversion of others' agony into the city's continued existence. Our investigation will trace this machine's function from its catastrophic origins through current operations, examining both the macro-mechanics of predation and the micro-experiences of inhabitants across all social strata. From needle spires where archons orchestrate galactic campaigns, to slave warrens where captives learn new definitions of endurance, every level serves the same fundamental purpose: the transformation of pain into power, terror into sustenance, despair into the currency of immortality. Listen to what passes for operational wisdom here. Feed or fade, everything bleeds eventually. These are not boasts, but procedural truths learned in narrow corridors, as literal as breathing and as necessary as gravity. The blade brought to work is not for glory, but a tool to secure an extra minute of someone's fear. The lie told is ballast for the weak. Mercy is mispriced kindness that will be recovered with interest. Consider Cathis, a low-tier Kabbalite whose survival depends on successful participation in collective predation. He knows the weight of his rifle and the angles of his archon's moods, updating armor rights with mechanic patience and measuring friendship in half-sincere nods. When sirens rise, he feels relief before fear. Raids mean quotas met, and quotas met mean fewer eyes on old debts. His perspective reveals how the machinery of suffering operates at its most basic level. Below the arenas, Vex High runs maintenance on serrated rollers that chew the footing beneath performers. He does not watch the games, but listens through metal, cataloguing pain like a quartermaster, and aligning cogs so screams arrive on schedule. His scarred hands maintain equipment that transforms death into consumable spectacle, showing how even the lowest servants become complicit in mechanisms they serve. Archon Sileth commands a mid-tier cabal, wielding power across several districts while remaining subject to greater predators' whims. In her tower, where light filters through skins, she reads contracts that look like art, their graceful script concealing clauses that will close on someone's throat, perhaps her own. Her maneuvering reveals the political machinery governing interfaction competition and the careful calculations determining which worlds live and die. Designation 7749 Tertius does not yet know her name is being depreciated. She remembers a door opening into light and falling without moving. Since then, days are measured by counting intervals, and air that tastes like others' breath. Her silence grows teeth as she learns the fundamental rule. If you speak, you are noticed. If noticed, you are priced. Through her processing, we witness the industrial scale of Commorragh's appetite and systematic methods by which identity dissolves into commodity. The cage reaches its destination with mechanical precision. A docent intones weights, ages, occupations. Figures drift into ledgers like ash into water. Below, pumps deepen their stroke, and the city exhales. This is not chaos, but procedure. A civilization at extinction's edge, rebuilt as a refinery of pain, where every citizen serves as both product and producer. The feeding begins again, as it has for 10 millennia, as it will for 10 millennia more. How did refugees become predators? What transforms survival into systematic predation? The transformation begins at the moment when gods are born, screaming. Before that birth, the Eldar had perfected a civilization that mistook sensation for transcendence, their psychic emanations pressing against the membrane between reality and the immaterium, until the membrane split. When Slaanesh clawed into existence, the psychic shockwave did not merely destroy worlds. It severed an entire species from the natural cycles that had sustained them for millions of years. Those who survived did so because they were already deep within the webway's ancient passages when the cataclysm passed, refugees in a labyrinth that would become both highway and prison. The survivors discovered a new physiological reality. Cut off from the psychic matrix that had once nourished their souls, like blood through veins, they faced something worse than death, the slow dissolution of consciousness itself. Medical examination would later reveal neural pathways that had once processed psychic energy, now demanding constant stimulation to prevent cellular breakdown. Without regular feeding, cognitive function deteriorated within days. Memory dissolved, motor control failed. The personality fragmented as the soul literally consumed its own substance for fuel. They called it soul thirst, and it behaved like starvation rather than mood. Limbs grew heavy, reflexes slowed, thoughts dulled at the edges, and beneath all that, terror. To think too brightly was to become visible to the new god that hunted them. The proto-Drukhari, already steeped in decadence before the fall, faced a choice that would define their species, moderate their desires, and accept gradual extinction, or externalize the cost entirely. They chose externalization with methodical precision. The doctrine formed not as manifesto, but as medical necessity. If their survival required suffering, others would provide it. If their consciousness demanded stimulation, captives would supply the raw material. Borrowed agony from other minds soothed the soul thirst temporarily, and this discovery crystallized into systematic practice. They refined techniques with the same cold brilliance that had destroyed them, learning to expose nerves without killing subjects, selecting prey by temperament because despair yielded thicker sustenance than rage, measuring how long screams resonated in psychic frequencies. Their refuge required walls, and the webway offered both shelter and constraint. This ancient network of stabilized unreality had once connected peaceful civilizations. Now it became the circulatory system of predatory empire. The proto-Drukhari learned to anchor districts with real space salvage, chunks of cities taken whole. industrial sectors cut from void stations, gardens lifted root and soil from dying worlds. These fragments were welded together by dark matter engineering that obeyed necessity rather than physics, creating spaces where gravity flowed upward and corridors bent through dimensions without names. Commorragh did not begin as a single city, but as a constellation of desperate settlements strung along hostile passages. Each portal became a valve that could be opened or closed according to operational requirements. Every gateway was priced, rationed, controlled. The webway's labyrinthine nature ensured that escape routes remained under strict management, while providing rapid access to real space for hunting expeditions. What had once been a highway became a controlled environment where predation could be systematized without exposure to the god that sought their souls. Individual predation proved insufficient to meet metabolic requirements. The first survival collectives formed around competent killers and meticulous administrators, groups that could pool resources and coordinate hunting expeditions. These early cabals established territorial claims within the growing city maze, developing protocols for resource sharing and conflict resolution that prevented internal warfare from depleting their limited population. They instituted rationing systems based on contribution and need. Warriors who participated in successful raids received priority access to fresh captives, while technical specialists earned feeding privileges through essential services. Competition between cabals drove innovation in capture techniques and processing methods. Pain became medicine, with names fit for ledgers, units, vintages, profiles. Torture techniques were exchanged for portal access. Captive populations were shared according to negotiated contracts. What began as desperate improvisation evolved into engineered predation, with corridors widened to accommodate transport cages and chambers modified with acoustic properties that amplified screams for maximum psychic yield. Within decades, desperation had crystallized into system. The refugee settlements became processing centers, where suffering was extracted, refined, and distributed with industrial efficiency. Webway passages filled with permanent installations, holding facilities, refinement laboratories, and distribution networks that transformed individual survival needs into collective infrastructure. The architecture itself adapted to these requirements, with ventilation systems carrying psychic emanations to subscribing districts like utilities delivering power. How does a city function when built from stolen pieces of reality? What daily protocols emerge when survival depends on others' pain? The answers lie in architecture that serves appetite, in structures designed to channel suffering upward, while maintaining the systematic conversion of terror into sustenance that keeps the dark city alive. The systematic conversion of desperation into infrastructure required more than ideology. It demanded architecture that could function as both habitat and hunting ground, structures that would serve the feeding cycle at every level. Over 10 millennia, Commorragh evolved into a vertical predator whose geometry instructs its citizens how to consume and be consumed. The city is not merely built, but calibrated, its distances and gradients designed to accelerate fear upward and channel control downward through mechanisms as precise as any industrial process. High Commorragh crowns this hierarchy in needle spires that pierce the artificial sky like surgical instruments. Here, Archon Silith maintains her tower, where captured starlight filters through membranes that flatter pale skin while concealing the decay beneath. These crystalline structures house more than palaces. They contain the planning chambers where galactic campaigns are orchestrated, their occupants dining on refined agony while calculating which worlds will provide the richest harvests. The spires connect through suspension bridges that arch over lower districts like ribs, their undersides fitted with observation galleries, where the elite witness the machinery of their survival, without contamination by its crude necessities. Light itself is rationed here, captured suns dimmed to tasteful cruelty, and distributed according to subscription tiers that invoice illumination like any other commodity. The middle reaches spread below in terraced districts where commerce and spectacle intersect with mechanical precision. Arena complexes rise like flowers of bone and metal, their seating arrangements calculated to amplify both visual and psychic impact, while broadcast nodes carry sensation to subscriber vaults throughout the city. Vexhigh moves through maintenance corridors beneath these entertainment venues, checking tension on serrated rollers and listening to how floors sing under the weight of audiences. The sound tells him whether the harvest will satisfy quotas. Flesh markets occupy the spaces between arenas, their stalls arranged in geometric patterns that optimize traffic flow while preventing escape routes. Transport tubes carry fresh captives to processing centers with conveyor efficiency, while administrative buildings coordinate the logistics of systematic predation through living sculptures that document conquests in breathing marble. Deeper still lies the lower dark, where function strips away all ornament, and the city's metabolism becomes visible. Slave warrens occupy reinforced chambers, designed with acoustic properties that muffle screams while channeling them upward through resonance conduits. Designation 7-749 Tertius moves with heavy carts through corridors, where schedules replace clocks and feeding windows click open and shut according to calculated intervals. Processing facilities operate with factory efficiency, their assembly lines converting raw terror into consumable products through techniques refined across millennia. Manufacturing sectors produce raid equipment in forges fueled by psychic emanations from nearby torture chambers, while drainage systems handle the byproducts of systematic cruelty, and ventilation networks extract useful screams while venting waste. The outer reaches mark where the city frays into uncertainty and rumor. Makeshift settlements cling to webway walls like parasites, their inhabitants surviving on sensation scraps and discarded captives. These districts serve dual functions as warning and resource, demonstrating failure's consequences while providing desperate populations willing to undertake the most dangerous raids for minimal compensation. Here, physics becomes negotiable. Steps miscount travelers, doors lead to earlier doors, and something older scratches from the undersides of plates while mandrakes bruise the edges of uncertain light. Arterial webway gates control all traffic flowing through this vertical ecosystem, their placement determining economic patterns and political power. These portals function as valves rather than doors, their petals irising open on schedules that determine which districts feast and which starve. Customs facilities process incoming raids while departure lounges accommodate outbound expeditions, the entire network operating under protocols that prevent unauthorized movement while ensuring rapid deployment of hunting parties. Scourges patrol the traffic like hawks, monitoring convoys queued in stacked lanes and billed by mass, by captives, by projected yield. Pain broadcast networks thread through infrastructure like nervous systems, carrying psychic emanations from source points to consumption nodes with fiber optic precision. These crystalline conduits began as simple distribution systems, but evolved into sophisticated arrays that allow subscribers to experience curated suffering from across the city. Resonance coils hum in service tunnels, while collector domes crown arenas and torture cloisters, pushing harvested sensation into transmission mains that meter flow by tier and contract. A micro-levy skims every transmission, a soul tax flowing into accounts that remain deliberately opaque. The architecture itself participates in predation through systematic design features that transform navigation into hazard. Steps cast to trip the slow herd fleeing bodies toward collection points. Floors tilt underweight to guide crowds past sensory harvesters. Doors equipped with pulse readers dilate for those with higher yield potential, while restricting access for depleted subjects. Panic shutters fall in sequences calculated during fire drills that double as harvest tests, sirens up, exits down, meters spinning to record the flow. Cathis learned his barracks layout by tracking how pain traveled through floors, discovering that pressing wrong plates triggered stipends paid in others' suffering. Even gravity serves the feeding cycle. Heat from caged suns rises through flues that pass sensory exchanges, warming them to optimal efficiency, while lift shafts reverse under alert protocols to elevate valuable bodies and drop liabilities. Access to vertical transit requires quotas signed in pain equivalents, creating a transportation system that literally runs on suffering. The city's nervous, circulatory, and digestive systems operate on synchronized schedules that Salith reviews from her tower. Arena peak hours, dovetailing with gate openings, and distillation cycles timed to the minute. For inhabitants at every level, navigation becomes a survival art, practiced through necessity rather than choice. Paths are chosen by smell, by the tone of distant machinery, by the way light hesitates at corners that might conceal collection nodes. Designation 7749 Tertius moves with loaded carts and away from empty ones, learning that transportation direction indicates feeding status. Vexa High follows maintenance schedules that align with the city's metabolic rhythms, understanding that missed steps trigger notice from systems designed to price everything, including attention itself. Who controls the flow of bodies and pain through this vertical hierarchy of systematic exploitation? How do inhabitants navigate daily existence within a structure designed to consume them at every level while maintaining the illusion of shelter and community? The city's geometry answers only part of the question. The rest lies with the syndicates that move through its vertical predator maze. Cabals function as military corporate entities that have evolved predation into organizational science, each one a self-contained ecosystem competing for resources, territory, and feeding rights while maintaining the delicate balance between individual ambition and collective survival. These organizations represent Commorragh's primary mechanism for transforming external raids into internal sustenance, their structures as rigid as any corporate flowchart, yet as lethal as any military formation. Archon Silith commands from her crystal tower, but authority flows through layers of subordinates whose loyalty must be constantly measured against their usefulness. Directly beneath her serve the Trueborn, genetic aristocrats whose bloodlines guarantee privileges while binding them to performance expectations that failure transforms into death sentences. These nobles coordinate major operations while competing for succession rights through achievements combining military success with political maneuvering, their positions secure only as long as raids generate sufficient yield to satisfy both Archon quotas and their own metabolic requirements. Below the Trueborn operate Kabbalite warriors like Caithis, whose survival depends on successful participation in collective predation while navigating constant assessment of loyalty and threat. His morning begins before artificial dawn, with equipment maintenance performed under observation, splinter rifle cleaned to specifications that double as loyalty tests, armor inspected for modifications suggesting independent thinking, communication devices checked for unauthorized frequencies that might indicate treacherous coordination. He notes which clasps on a rival's harness sit too clean, suggesting recent replacement and recent favor, while touching charms made from cut knuckles and signed chits from previous raids. Tactical briefings follow protocols refined across millennia of systematic predation. Caithis stands with his squad in chambers, where holographic displays show target worlds rotating like fruit ready for harvest, their populations analyzed by vulnerability indices and yield projections that reduce civilizations to resource calculations. The Sybarite speaks in clauses, portal window 8 minutes, exclusion zones around rival concessions, priority captures sorted by utility, adult laborers for industrial use, adolescents for arena training, aged for distillation. Which cult representatives attend as stakeholders with performance riders, while homunculi factors attend as purchasers with precise anatomical requests. These briefings reveal how advancement requires competencies extending beyond simple violence. Caithis maintains detailed records of successful captures, noting which techniques generated optimal terror yields and which target populations provided sustainable harvests. Political maneuvering becomes as crucial as marksmanship, forming alliances with rising subordinates while avoiding association with declining superiors, calculating when cooperation serves advancement and when betrayal becomes necessary for survival. This system prevents internal warfare through contract warfare agreements that formalize inter-cabal conflicts according to rules designed to prevent city-wide destruction. These accords establish protocols for territorial disputes, resource competition, and succession challenges while maintaining overall stability necessary for continued predation. Feuds exist, vendettas flourish, yet even assassination is itemized under rules, negotiated through intermediaries whose neutrality is paid for in long memory. No discharges above specified yield inspire corridors, no sabotage of broadcast arrays during subscription peaks, no use of prescribed toxins within Resurrection client vault radius. Central to these arrangements stands the cabal of the Black Heart, whose role as traffic controllers and arbitrators grants influence extending far beyond apparent military strength. They manage webway gate access through permit systems, determining which cabals can launch raids and when, coordinate scheduling that prevents conflicts over hunting grounds, and arbitrate disputes through procedures appearing neutral while serving interests remaining deliberately opaque. Silith's factor negotiates for gate slots with clerks, whose eyes never rise from crystal slates, depositing soul credit into escrow, and agreeing to terms reading as logistics but functioning as leash. The Black Heart rarely threatens directly. They adjust scheduling columns, and that proves sufficient. Those violating arbitration discover convoys delayed at crucial times, broadcasts throttled during peak feeding hours, resurrection guarantees subject to unexpected footnotes. Their administrative buildings process portal applications with bureaucratic precision, clerks stamping authorizations that can make or break rival organizations through timing alone. External raids exist as safety valves for internal pressures, serving dual purposes beyond simple resource acquisition. They provide outlets for constant aggression that would otherwise destabilize cabal structures, allowing warriors to discharge frustration through sanctioned violence against external targets while generating psychic sustenance necessary to maintain feeding schedules. When schedules slip and hunts stall, cabals turn inward. Maims become messages. Corridors fill with quiet knives. The Black Heart ensures arteries open precisely when tension crests, new targets appearing on schedules as aggression flows outward and bodies flow back in. On embarkation decks, doctrine becomes practice with mechanical elegance. Raiders hang in cradles like predatory fish at rest, venoms humming behind filters tasting of old blood, scourges weighing loads against promised shares. Cathis listens to engine pitch and sybarite cadence for hints of last-minute amendments, betraying rival influence, resisting the Ichi-Isa urge to examine the witch cult representative, whose presence suggests arena quotas have been purchased in advance. External predation sustains internal equilibrium by feeding every contract embedded in this machinery. Black markets moving contraband toxins, resurrection retainer fees, arena subscriptions, pain broadcast micro-levies. Without harvest, ledgers bleed, and when ledgers bleed, knives come home. What transforms these captured victims into commodities fueling this machine? How is suffering processed and distributed throughout the city to maintain the delicate balance between individual hunger and collective survival? The raid's success becomes meaningful only when its harvest enters the conversion machinery that transforms raw terror into the commodities sustaining Commorragh's metabolism. Transport cages discharge their contents at intake facilities, where systematic evaluation begins immediately. Not crude battlefield sorting, but precise assessment conducted with laboratory protocols, refined across 10 millennia of industrial-scale predation. These processing centers function as the city's digestive organs, breaking down captured suffering into components that can be distributed through networks serving every level of the vertical hierarchy. Designation 7749 Tertius moves through intake with mechanical precision, clerks wearing masks of polished bone examining her responses to calibrated stimuli. Lamps bloom above each subject, their spectra tuned to provoke reflex memories, while the first flinch is measured and priced. Profile engines listen for breath timbre and assign provisional classifications: resigned, brittle, defiant, devotional. A machine pricks fingers, droplets smoke on contact with analysis glass, and durability indices populate columns beside age, weight, and projected utility. Her processing number is tattooed in symbols encoding psychological profile, physical resilience, and market value determined through responses to graduated torment. The evaluation process sorts captives by suffering flavor with scientific thoroughness. Different types of despair generate distinct psychic signatures serving specialized markets. Maternal grief produces emanations prized by certain Archon palettes, while professional humiliation generates frequencies favored in middle-tier subscription packages. Religious despair ages well in storage, developing complexity that commands premium prices from discerning consumers. Flavor codes fix to margins in ledgers, where clerks pen notes in script designed to be beautiful at arm's length and cruel at reading distance. Ash for grief, brine for fear, weariness, iron for vengeful grit, milk for naive hope. Physical durability receives equal scrutiny through examinations mapping pain tolerance, healing rates, and psychological breaking points with actuarial precision. Subjects are stress-tested through controlled applications of graduated torment, while monitors record biorhythms, neural activity, and psychic emanations. Those demonstrating high thresholds are marked for extended processing sequences, maximizing yield over time. Fragile specimens receive immediate distillation designations before deterioration reduces value. Medical histories are extracted through chemical interrogation, revealing genetic predispositions determining optimal exploitation methods. Homunculi representatives attend these evaluations as both customers and suppliers, their purchasing decisions driving operational rhythm throughout the facilities. They arrive in surgical gowns that gleam like oil, examining specimens with detached collector interest. Their requirements are precise, specific anatomical configurations for experimental purposes, particular psychological profiles for consciousness, transfer procedures, rare genetic markers for projects whose nature remains deliberately obscured. Purchase orders unspool requesting specimens with clean neural lattices for memory harvesting, devotional profiles for martyr loops, children for pliability studies. In exchange, they deliver files of refined essence, graftable organs, and resurrection retainers guaranteeing personnel continuity for cabals maintaining payment schedules. These same homunculi supply technical infrastructure, enabling large-scale processing through distillation chambers, extracting psychic essence with industrial efficiency. Crystalline vessels suspend subjects in fields, amplifying nervous system activity, while collectors harvest resulting emanations. The process extends across days or weeks, subjects maintained at optimal suffering levels through automated systems delivering precisely calibrated stimuli. Distillation begins as soft hum felt in molars, while operators raise stimuli in sequences keeping souls near cliffs without pushing them over. Sensors drink what spills, coils condensing it into pale fluid, gleaming like winter breath in jars. Storage facilities maintain processed suffering under conditions preserving potency, while allowing controlled aging processes enhancing flavor profiles. Vintage anguish from particularly productive subjects is housed in specialized vaults, where temporal fields slow decay while concentrating psychic density. These reserves serve as strategic stockpiles during reduced raiding periods, contents distributed through rationing systems, preventing supply shortages from destabilizing feeding schedules. Labels tally origin, method, and hour, while the best vintages develop through patient, almost tender cultivation. Pain quotas regulate this economy with water rights precision. Each district files weekly yield declarations, while auditor teams compare ledger claims against meter outputs and pallet readings. Agony audits investigate suspicious spikes and droughts equally. Overscream theft is prosecuted with more zeal than murder. If shortfall persists, penalties cascade through broadcast throttling, gate delays, and reduced resurrection coverage. The numbers must trust the mouths producing them, or everything above and below begins shaken. Distribution networks carry refined suffering throughout the city via crystalline conduits, functioning as both transport and metering systems. The infrastructure itself feeds on processed suffering through mechanisms remaining largely invisible. Building systems drawing power from pain broadcast networks, ventilation systems circulating psychic emanations like atmospheric conditioning, transportation networks pulsing with greater reliability when supplied with fresh terror. Designation 7749 Tertius receives assignment to Warren C-17, where air tastes faintly sweet from fresh essence in vents. Somewhere close, chambers hum while someone does not sleep. Her maintenance duties in arena complexes will expose her to residual emanations from recent performances, providing minimal sustenance, preventing immediate deterioration, while maintaining functionality for required tasks. This represents calculated management, just enough nourishment to maintain productivity while ensuring continued dependency. In ledger terms, everything balances, bodies in, essence out, quotas met. But who certifies measurements, sets tolerances, writes clauses turning souls into invoices? Who are these homunculi whose technical expertise enables industrial-scale conversion of agony into sustenance? How does public spectacle serve the private consumption, driving this systematic transformation of suffering into the currency of survival? The technical expertise enabling Commorragh's industrial-scale suffering conversion originates in laboratories where philosophy merges with practice through methodologies that treat pain as medium, flesh as sculpture, and death as negotiable contract terms. The homunculi covens represent the city's scientific establishment, their ancient members pursuing knowledge through procedures that systematically edit away conventional mortality while preserving consciousness in forms optimized for eternal study of sensation and transformation. Their laboratories occupy districts where architecture bends to accommodate experiments requiring non-standard physics, chambers expanding beyond measured dimensions, while corridors stretch to house projects whose scale exists in theoretical rather than practical space. Within these spaces, surgical theaters rise in crystalline amphitheaters, where procedures are performed for audiences of peers whose appreciation is measured through technical critique rather than emotional response. The air carries chemical signatures of processes dissolving boundaries between organic and mechanical, living and dead, willing and unwilling. Homunculi pursue what they term living art through systematic exploration of consciousness and flesh, viewing suffering not as cruelty, but as data collection. Each scream provides information about neural pathway efficiency and pain threshold optimization. Their detached or intellectualism transforms torture into research methodology, treating subjects as collaborative participants in investigations, yielding insights beneficial to both practitioner and specimen. This philosophical framework allows them to perform procedures of exquisite horror while maintaining scientific objectivity that treats agony as measurement rather than malice. Their services extend far beyond simple torture into comprehensive life modification, addressing every aspect of existence in Commorragh. Life extension represents their fundamental offering, achieved through grotesque modifications replacing failing organs with mechanical alternatives, grafting additional limbs for enhanced capability, and installing neural interfaces allowing direct psychic feeding from external sources. These procedures bind clients to ongoing maintenance contracts requiring regular adjustments, replacement parts, and compatibility updates, ensuring perpetual dependency on Coven services. Resurrection services operate under clauses transforming death from ending into temporary inconvenience, subject to interest charges and performance penalties. Clients purchasing resurrection coverage discover that death triggers automatic renewal at adjusted rates reflecting risk assessment and market conditions. The process involves consciousness transfer into prepared vessels, often requiring anatomical modifications to accommodate neural patterns shaped by previous alterations. Each resurrection accumulates debt serviced through extended contracts, binding subjects to Coven requirements, extending across multiple lifetimes. Flesh contracts govern all Coven interactions through legal frameworks, treating bodies as collateral and consciousness as transferable assets. These documents specify modification procedures, maintenance schedules, and performance expectations, while establishing penalties for non-compliance, escalating through increasingly invasive interventions. Clients discover that seemingly minor procedures create dependencies requiring additional modifications, each adjustment generating new contractual obligations, compounding over time into permanent servitude disguised as medical necessity. The contracts themselves represent artistic achievements, combining legal precision with aesthetic beauty, their calligraphy concealing clauses activating under conditions clients rarely anticipate. Resurrection clauses trigger automatically upon death regardless of circumstances or client preferences. Modification clauses allow homunculi to perform necessary adjustments without additional consent when maintenance requirements exceed projected parameters. Service clauses convert clients into Coven assets when accumulated debt reaches thresholds calculated to ensure eventual activation. Racks serve as both advertisement and warning regarding Coven services, these former clients now functioning as laboratory assistants, whose humanity has been systematically edited away through procedures leaving them perfectly adapted to their current roles. Once these beings possessed names, ambitions, and relationships, now they exist as extensions of homunculus will, their consciousness preserved, but edited to find fulfillment only through service to their creators. They move through laboratories with mechanical precision, their modified forms optimized for tasks requiring inhuman dexterity, while their faces retain enough original features to remind observers of what they once were. Beyond individual services, the Covens create living weapons, transforming subjects into implements serving specific tactical functions, while preserving enough consciousness to appreciate their transformation. Grotesques lumber through adjacent halls, organ banks wrapped in muscle and hate for deployment, where terror must be harvested at scale. Talos engines drift like grieving saints, their carapaces stitched from failures and second thoughts. Kronos parasites hover by broadcast mains, ingesting raw agony and excreting refined essence into city conduits. These mechanisms provide technical infrastructure, supporting the city's immortality through systematic conversion of individual mortality into collective resource. The Covens maintain resurrection facilities serving every major cabal, while operating modification centers, addressing enhancement requests from clients, seeking competitive advantages. Their expertise in consciousness transfer enables preservation of essential personnel across multiple deaths, while their flesh-crafting skills produce specialized servants optimized for particular functions. The Coven's genius lies in creating systems where technical necessity drives moral compromise, clients entering arrangements they understand intellectually but cannot resist practically. Archon Seleth maintains resurrection coverage despite knowing each death increases her debt, because the alternative is permanent extinction. Even designation 7749 Tertius, processing through intake, represents potential raw material for projects whose completion would transform her suffering into art serving the city's broader appetite. How does the city channel its appetite for spectacle and sensation beyond these private laboratories? What role do public displays of violence play in maintaining social order while serving the collective hunger driving every aspect of existence in the Dark City? The private refinement of suffering in homunculi laboratories serves individual clients, but Commorragh's collective appetite requires public spectacle operating at industrial scales, where personal agony becomes communal nourishment. The witch cults transform this metabolic necessity into systematic entertainment through arena complexes functioning as both pressure valves and feeding stations, their performances satisfying the populace's soul thirst while demonstrating failure's consequences to audiences who consume combatant terror as directly as any resurrection client. Arena architecture amplifies sensation through design principles treating violence as broadcast medium rather than simple combat. Crystalline amphitheaters focus acoustic energy, while seating arrangements position audiences according to feeding capacity and subscription tiers, with premium locations receiving concentrated emanations, while general admission sections share diluted experiences. The structures themselves participate in performance through responsive surfaces that pulse with combatant heartbeats, and floors equipped with hydraulic systems, creating shifting terrain that forces fighters into predetermined positions for maximum psychic yield. Vexahai moves through maintenance corridors beneath these entertainment venues, his scarred hands adjusting mechanisms that transform death into consumable spectacle. He checks tension on serrated rollers designed to prolong rather than accelerate demise, their rotation speeds calibrated to maximize suffering duration while maintaining audience engagement. His duties include testing trapgate hinges with practiced pressure, marking cracked sluice veins that could bleed away valuable screams, and replacing resonance coils before signal degradation reduces market value. When he listens through metal during performances, cataloging pain like a quartermaster, he hears how properly maintained equipment ensures every scream reaches maximum distribution through broadcast networks threading the city like nerves. The broadcast pylons rising like thorns from arena complexes stitch spectacle into pain distribution networks, carrying experiences throughout Commorragh via crystalline conduits that meter consumption and bill according to intensity levels. Audience feeding represents the arena's primary economic function, transforming spectator experience from passive observation into active consumption through neural interfaces, allowing direct experience of combatant sensations. Premium packages include emotional editing that intensifies specific elements while filtering undesirable responses, creating customized experiences tailored to individual palettes, with surge pricing during popular events. Performance contracts govern witch cult operations through agreements specifying death quotas, audience satisfaction metrics, and revenue-sharing arrangements, treating performers as content providers whose value is measured through psychic yield generated during combat. These documents include resurrection clauses ensuring valuable performers remain available for future events, while binding them to exclusive arrangements, preventing competition between venues. The cults provide meritocratic advancement paths unavailable in rigid Cabal hierarchies, allowing individuals to rise through demonstrated competence in delivering spectacular death, while learning techniques designed to maximize audience sensation rather than combat efficiency. Beyond entertainment, these public displays serve social control functions through systematic demonstration of failure consequences. Citizens witnessing what happens to those who challenge established hierarchies or break contracts can discharge frustration through vicarious participation in sanctioned violence, while receiving metabolic sustenance, preventing deterioration. The spectacle reinforces behavioral norms while providing recruitment opportunities, with successful performers attracting attention from Cabal recruiters, seeking specimens, demonstrating particular pain tolerance, or artistic dyeing techniques. As Vex High completes maintenance routines, he notices increased activity suggesting coordination between internal entertainment systems and external operations. Arena scheduling has accelerated while equipment requisitions spike for specialized implements designed to process exotic captives. These preparations indicate approaching necessity. When internal reserves drop below sustainable levels, the city's appetite demands external feeding through coordinated predation that will provide both resources and spectacular content. How do these internal systems coordinate for external predation? What does a real space raid reveal about Commorragh's true nature as systematic conversion of others' civilizations into the currency of survival? The coordination becomes visible when necessity crystallizes into action, internal systems aligning with mechanical precision as Commorragh's appetite demands external feeding. The arenas dim a fraction before the portals open, as if the city inhales, preparing to taste what will follow. The target is Hive Viridian 6, an imperial world whose 90 billion inhabitants represent inventory catalogued in advance through reconnaissance reports filed like market surveys, their terror and flesh already priced according to demographic analysis and psychic resonance potential. Webway portals iris open in 17 calculated locations across the Hive world surface, their placement determined through algorithmic analysis of population density, escape route availability, and transport capacity optimization. Each portal disgorges raiders whose equipment and objectives reflect systematic specialization designed to maximize yield while minimizing operational costs. The raid operates like industrial extraction, its tempo governed by logistical constraints rather than military necessity. Every movement coordinated through tactical networks treating billions of lives as movement vectors requiring efficient processing. From her command vessel, hovering in the webway's margin, Archon Silith coordinates the overall assault through tactical displays, reducing human civilization to flowcharts and yield projections. Overlay glyphs mark agreed corridors and forbidden zones, while Blackheart permit codes blink like locks acknowledging keys, her authority constrained by contracts governing inter-cabal competition and resource allocation. Her voice carries through comm networks with clinical precision, adjusting deployment schedules as resistance proves stronger than projected at Portal 7, while Portal 12 reports overcapacity requiring overflow redirection to secondary processing sites. Cathis leads his slave-taking squad through the narrow passages of Manufactorum Gamma 7, his splinter rifle chattering with focused pain that drops targets without excessive damage to their physical forms. His objective reflects economic calculation rather than military doctrine. Secure younger workers from textile lines whose malleability makes them prime stock for homunculi projects and arena training programs. Ritual checks become comfort as he directs his warriors to use stun grenades rather than lethal force, preserving merchandise value while herding terrified groups into pre-designated collection zones. When a new recruit hesitates, fascinated by the volume of terror, Cathis corrects him with mechanical efficiency. Every wasted scream represents missed quotas. Every dead body reduces profit margins. Reaver jet bikes scream through Hab District canyons, their riders wielding pain induction weapons that disable without destroying valuable merchandise. The bikes herd fleeing populations with predatory intelligence, their engines shrieking frequencies calibrated to induce panic, while broadcast receivers harvest resulting terror, feeding psychic emanations directly into Commorragh's distribution networks through real-time transmission arrays. They cut off escape routes while driving crowds toward kill zones, where transport capacity awaits, their sonic knives turning human flow into predetermined catch basins designed for optimal loading efficiency. Above the chaos, scourges provide aerial coordination through wing formations, mapping population movements while directing ground forces toward highest value targets. Their enhanced senses identify children for malleability processing, adults for durability requirements, and elders whose accumulated despair will age into premium vintage. They relay traffic updates and correct flow with precise violence, marking priority captures with targeting lasers while coordinating transport schedules, ensuring optimal distribution across available convoy capacity. Arena gangs compete for spectacular kills, generating broadcast content, their performances designed for audiences consuming the spectacle through neural interfaces back in Commorragh. The Serpent's Kiss witch cult revels in choreographed death, their leader dancing through carnage with razor-sharp blades, while broadcast units relay every gasp and plea to subscribing districts. Her performance serves dual functions, eliminating excess population while generating entertainment revenue, subsidizing raid expenses through audience-feeding contracts and premium content sales. Homunculi move through the carnage with collector detachment, selecting prime specimens according to research requirements and modification potential. In temporary triage stations, near secondary portals, they examine genetic markers through portable scanners while evaluating psychological profiles based on stress responses to graduated terror. An Imperial Guard officer's impotent fury offers unique, fiery despair, while an elderly woman's accumulated memories provide deeper vintage potential. Children receive stasis field placement, their malleable minds representing raw material for consciousness transfer procedures requiring subjects meeting precise specifications. The human victims experience systematic terror designed to maximize psychic yield rather than simple destruction. Families are separated according to protocols generating specific emotional responses: parental anguish, sibling desperation, childhood bewilderment, each producing distinct emanations, serving different market segments. A shift supervisor watches her production line freeze, hears whines she cannot name, then discovers corridors that were safe have become blades. Every efficient choice she makes tightens nets designed through millennia of practice to extract maximum sensation while preserving specimen viability for transport. Economic logic governs every aspect of the operation through selective harvesting reflecting market demand. Industrial districts yield adult laborers whose physical durability suits manufacturing requirements, while residential sectors provide family units whose emotional bonds generate premium despair when systematically severed. Educational facilities supply children whose psychological malleability makes them ideal for modification procedures, and elderly care centers provide subjects whose accumulated life experience produces complex emotional vintages prized by discerning consumers. Throughout the raid, terror feeds back through psychic networks to Commorragh itself, where audiences consume the experience through broadcast interfaces, creating surge demand across arena complexes. The city's lights acquire warmer cruelty as broadcast pylons pulse with borrowed sensation, distribution networks operating at capacity, while their crystalline conduits pulse with harvested anguish from 90 billion voices reduced to resource streams. Vex High feels the pressure through steel floors, while Designation 7749, Tertius, tastes sweetness in ventilation, knowing, without understanding, that someone screams far away so she can sleep tonight. As webway portals prepare for withdrawal, convoys organize according to cargo classifications reflecting systematic processing requirements. Standard slaves load into transport cages, while priority specimens receive specialized containment, ensuring optimal condition upon reaching processing facilities. The wounded are sorted by recovery potential, with those requiring extensive medical intervention marked for immediate distillation, preventing total investment loss. The raid's success measures through yield metrics rather than military objectives. Transport capacity fills according to predetermined quotas, while broadcast revenues exceed projections. The convoy's return triggers immediate processing system activation throughout Commorragh's vertical hierarchy. Intake facilities staff to capacity, while distribution networks prepare for influx management, the city's metabolism accelerating in anticipation of fresh feeding. Arena schedules update to accommodate exotic combatants, while flesh markets prepare inventory displays featuring recently captured specimens, the harvest beginning its transformation into commodities sustaining the Dark City's continued existence. How does this fresh influx of suffering ripple through the city's economy, satisfying quotas while generating new demands that will require future raids? What hidden costs do these systematic predations extract from Commorragh itself, and how do they affect the delicate balance between internal stability and external necessity? The convoy's return triggers cascading activation throughout Commorragh's distribution networks, as fresh harvest flows into systems designed to convert raw terror into consumable commodities. Portals dilate to discharge steel cages, while intake facilities surge from reduced capacity to full operation, their automated systems beginning immediate evaluation protocols. The city's metabolism accelerates with predatory precision, every district receiving allocations calculated to maintain feeding schedules while generating surplus for strategic reserves that will never prove sufficient. Processing centers operate like industrial liturgy, captives funneled through chromatic thresholds that provoke, record, and assign. Children identified during the Hive Viridian 6th raid pass beneath spectrum lamps highlighting malleability indices, while adults route through stress corridors where pain gates sample reflexes and calculate durability ratings. Elderly subjects face mirrored walls, triggering layered recall, technicians cataloging the despair that rises like vintage wine. Tags bloom on wrists encoding arena stock, labor grade, distillation priority, covenant reserve. Each assignment aligns with contracts negotiated before the raid commenced, reducing 90 billion lives to inventory distributed according to market demand. The economic boost ripples through every level with measurable precision. Pain broadcast networks surge beyond baseline capacity as fresh terror feeds subscribing districts, crystalline conduits pulsing with emanations that temporarily satisfy accumulated hunger while generating revenue through premium content distribution. Flesh markets throughout the middle reaches experience inventory gluts, vendors adjusting pricing to move excess stock while maintaining quality standards. Arena complexes update schedules accommodating exotic combatants, promotional materials, advertising Imperial Guard training, matches designed to maximize audience feeding while demonstrating resistance consequences. Yet even this abundance serves mechanisms that consume portions of every harvest through systems operating beyond conscious awareness. The soul tax represents infrastructure overhead extracted automatically from all psychic emanations flowing through city networks, percentages skimmed by building systems, transportation arrays, and broadcast networks requiring constant feeding to maintain operational efficiency. Elevators move smoothly when powered by fresh anguish, lighting burns steadier when drawing from recent terror. Captured suns pulse with renewed intensity as their containment systems feed on processed suffering. The city itself consumes through hidden mechanisms, treating agony as both commodity and fuel, ensuring even successful raids provide only temporary relief. Designation 7th Sini Tertius receives assignment to arena maintenance, her processing number encoding psychological profile and projected utility. She arrives at service tunnels beneath performance venues, where Vex High teaches survival through mechanical precision. He shows her how to clean serrated equipment without dulling resonance frequencies, how to test trapgate mechanisms, ensuring optimal suffering duration, when to volunteer for additional duties, demonstrating value while avoiding assignments exposing workers to excessive risk. His instruction represents practical education in navigating predatory employment while maintaining minimal metabolic requirements. Working together in corridors where arena performances echo through steel, they develop cautious cooperation necessary for survival in systems designed to exploit every relationship. Vexa High shares knowledge accumulated through years of service, which supervisors respond to efficiency versus deference, how to recognize equipment failures before they trigger penalties, why certain maintenance schedules align with broadcast peak hours, generating higher yields. Their partnership demonstrates how even the lowest positions require constant calculation, balancing individual survival against systematic exploitation. The temporary satisfaction reveals limitations through consumption pattern analysis. Even massive harvests provide relief measured in weeks rather than months, the city's appetite expanding to accommodate increased supply while generating new demands requiring future operations. Arena audiences develop tolerance, requiring more exotic entertainment. Flesh market customers seek increasingly specialized specimens. Homunculi clients request modifications demanding rarer genetic materials. Success breeds escalation through mechanisms transforming abundance into necessity, each satisfied quota becoming baseline for higher expectations. District feeding schedules demonstrate this escalation through adjusted quotas reflecting temporary surplus availability. Citizens receiving enhanced rations during post-raid periods develop expectations becoming requirements, their metabolic needs adjusting to higher stimulation levels, while tolerance for reduced supply decreases correspondingly. The economic boost becomes metabolic trap, creating dependencies ensuring future raids must exceed previous yields to maintain stability. Within days, planning begins for subsequent operations as reconnaissance teams filed reports on potential targets, while procurement specialists evaluate market demand for specific specimen types. The successful raid generates data improving future efficiency. Population herding techniques, transport optimization, processing bottlenecks requiring equipment upgrades. Each operation serves as research, contributing to systematic refinement of predatory methodology. As 7749 Tertius learns her duties, she observes how even successful harvests provide only temporary relief before hunger reasserts with increased intensity. Arena schedules show gaps requiring fresh content, while flesh market inventories decline through normal consumption. Distribution networks that carried abundance now prepare for scarcity management, operators adjusting allocation formulas, while calculating when external feeding becomes necessity rather than opportunity. What happens to those who cannot meet the city's escalating demands when temporary abundance transforms into renewed hunger? How do individuals develop survival strategies within systems designed to consume everything they produce while demanding constant increases in yield and efficiency? The escalating demands generated by successful raids force inhabitants across every stratum to develop survival protocols that operate within predatory structures while appearing to circumvent them. These adaptive strategies represent evolutionary responses to systematic exploitation, with individuals learning to navigate hierarchies designed to consume them through techniques refined across generations of practiced desperation. In the arena maintenance tunnels, Vex High instructs designation 7749 Tertius without sentiment or false comfort. He demonstrates how to adjust serrated roller tension by fractions that extend death into artistry, enough compliance to satisfy meters while creating margins that keep performers alive until premium viewing hours when yields command higher prices. His lessons encode survival wisdom, which inspectors mark tolerance symbols, how to time valve purges creating 5-breath windows between stimulation cycles, when minor inefficiencies prevent catastrophic failures triggering audits. This knowledge becomes currency traded for extra rations, advance warnings of sweeps, or simple acknowledgement of continued existence. Useful knowledge flows through shadow networks operating like capillaries beneath major arteries. Information about supervisor moods, quota fluctuations, and equipment failures trades hands through systems that function beyond official oversight, while somehow never quite escaping it entirely. Workers share intelligence about safe hiding spaces and sympathetic guards through maintenance schedules and equipment positioning, creating communication methods that appear coincidental while serving coordinated survival needs. Kabbalite survival requires more sophisticated political calculation as individuals hedge bets across multiple power structures. Caithis navigates complex situations involving performance metrics and rumors of declining Archon favor through careful relationship management. He cultivates rising subordinates while maintaining loyalty to current superiors, documenting successful raids in personal records, supporting future advancement while avoiding associations that might prove liabilities during hierarchy shifts. His barracks operates shadow economies, trading ammunition modifications for duty roster preferences, intelligence for equipment services, and coordinated alibis, protecting individuals during investigations. Even Archon Silith maintains contingencies, acknowledging power's precarious nature in systems designed to consume leadership as readily as subordinates. Her apparent independence masks diversified resurrection contracts with competing homunculi covens, multiple safe houses, and communication channels, enabling rapid alliance formation during crises. She prepares for scenarios ranging from internal betrayal to external threat through resources distributed across hidden caches and agents positioned throughout potential refuge locations. These survival strategies demand psychological adaptations, transforming paranoia from dysfunction into essential skill. Trust becomes calculated investment rather than emotional connection, with cooperation measured through utility rather than affection. Individuals learn compartmentalization as martial technique, Caithis practices being tender at morning muster and necessary during afternoon raids, neither contaminating the other. Everyone learns to count steps, breaths, debts, and the intervals between them. Yet patterns suggest these networks operate with suspicious tolerance, even encouragement, from higher authorities. Information flows through shadow channels, with efficiency indicating monitoring systems that permit specific coordination types while restricting others. Protection rackets function with minimal official interference, suggesting they serve purposes beyond simple corruption. When Caithis investigates supply irregularities affecting his squad's allocation, inquiries through informal channels receive responses containing details too precise for casual knowledge. The revelation comes during a routine transaction in a shrine to forgotten pilots, where scrap idols witness exchanges that leave no official records. Caithis trades root intelligence for silence, protecting a friend marked by audit, the deal occurring in spaces that seem exempt from standard surveillance. Hours later, a permit appears, authorizing access to maintenance lifts that will save crucial minutes during next muster, time that translates directly to survival probability. He traces the authorization to a clerk whose desk touches gatehouse walls, where shadow markets pay rent to entities remaining deliberately unnamed. She offers tea tasting of metal while recording nothing, her smile containing knowledge that extends beyond individual transaction. Behind her, an office door reveals ledgers with 2 columns, variance and containment. His name appears in the first, connected by thin lines to symbols in the second matching seals, on permits he never requested. The psychological toll becomes visible through behavioral adaptations, sacrificing individual agency for collective survival. Workers anticipate punishment before infractions occur, adjusting behavior according to projected rather than actual threats, while developing emotional detachment, protecting consciousness from trauma. Relationships form around utility calculations rather than personal connection, cooperation measured through survival benefit rather than affection. These adaptations create populations perfectly suited to systematic exploitation. Individuals whose survival strategies serve larger mechanisms they cannot perceive or resist. The shadow networks offering protection may function as pressure valves, preventing resistance from reaching levels threatening overall stability. The informal economies providing apparent autonomy may serve as monitoring systems, tracking capabilities and loyalties while channeling dissent into manageable forms. Are these survival networks genuinely independent expressions of resistance, or sophisticated control mechanisms disguised as organic adaptation? Who benefits when the city's apparent chaos arrives on schedule? And how do seemingly random conflicts serve systematic purposes that inhabitants cannot recognize while struggling for individual survival? The survival networks offering apparent refuge dissolve under closer examination, their seeming independence revealing patterns too precise for organic development. The truth emerges not through dramatic revelation, but through systematic recognition. Too many coincidences aligning with interests that remain deliberately opaque. Too much efficiency in systems claiming to function through desperate improvisation. What appeared as evolutionary adaptation to predatory conditions reveals itself as sophisticated behavioral management disguised as choice. The cabal of the Black Heart operates far beyond traffic coordination, their administrative complexes housing monitoring stations that track information flows through shadow networks with algorithmic precision. Economic modeling departments predict behavioral responses to resource adjustments, while coordination centers orchestrate events appearing random, yet serving calculated purposes. The organization that claims to arbitrate conflicts actually architects the competitions it pretends to resolve, profiting from every dispute while ensuring no faction gains sufficient power to challenge their infrastructure monopoly. Webway access represents their primary control mechanism, with portal permits functioning as economic throttles determining which cabals prosper and which decline according to strategic objectives extending beyond simple profit. Archon Sileth's recent political troubles trace directly to permit delays that prevented her forces from participating in lucrative raids. Her convoy delayed 11 minutes and redirected 7 decks down, changes appearing clerical while serving systematic marginalization. Resource restrictions limited her ability to maintain alliances, while transportation bottlenecks reduced her district's feeding efficiency, each obstacle designed to increase dependency on Black Heart services. These delays operate with surgical precision. When Saleth's scheduled egress rolls late, rival cabals surge through prime corridors first, harvest overlaps, trigger contractual disputes, and her convoy spends appetite in traffic rather than real space. The permit carries correct seals and proper authorization. The sting lies in timing, calculated to generate specific economic pressures. Her ammunition shipments face fumigation delays, while competitors' convoys glide past customs with expedited processing. The differential treatment creating competitive disadvantages that compound over operational cycles. Pane broadcast networks answer to similar manipulation through infrastructure ownership that remains legally obscured yet functionally absolute. The crystalline conduits carrying psychic emanations throughout the city require maintenance contracts, upgrade services, and access fees, creating permanent dependencies while generating surveillance opportunities. Broadcast quality degrades according to payment schedules and loyalty assessments, with technical difficulties affecting districts whose inhabitants express insufficient deference to established hierarchies. Signal dampers miscalibrate during arena finals in neighborhoods predicted to experience unrest, while surge pricing follows not demand patterns, but outcomes of unpublicized arbitration decisions. Managed scarcity governs resource distribution through algorithms calculating optimal deprivation levels that maintain desperation without triggering rebellion. The doctrine ensures just enough portal slots to keep cabals hungry, sufficient essence to maintain district stability, adequate equipment to force cooperation that can be withdrawn when independence threatens systematic balance. When supply rises, tolerance bands narrow automatically, quotas adjust upward, delivery windows shorten, and blackouts extend by calculated intervals. The system holds populations at metabolic knife edge, where gratitude becomes receipt and ambition transforms into leash. Orchestrated competition prevents genuine threats through careful manipulation of inter-cabal conflicts that appear organic while serving predetermined outcomes. Arena slot auctions open and close in cycles, mirroring gate permit availability, creating artificial scarcities that force cooperation between rivals. Feuds are grandfathered and detonated on timetables, ensuring damage never affects broadcast infrastructure or primary portal networks. When Caithis receives conflicting orders through different intermediaries, a shakedown versus courier protection, his choice triggers consequences calculated in advance, with ammunition allotments appearing on racks labeled as scrap when decisions align with systematic requirements. Evidence accumulates through surveillance of shadow networks that seemed to offer protection from official oversight. The maintenance tunnels where Vex High teaches survival techniques contain monitoring equipment disguised as structural elements, recording conversations while cataloging knowledge exchange patterns. The shrine where Caithis conducted his transaction operates under permits requiring information sharing with security services, its apparent sanctuary status, serving intelligence gathering rather than genuine protection. Even designation 7749 Tertius discovers her work assignments follow patterns suggesting behavioral modification rather than random placement. The survival strategies inhabitants develop serve larger mechanisms they cannot perceive or resist. Shadow networks function as thermostats rather than resistors, their apparent protection operating as control systems, ensuring compliance through manufactured dependency. Information traded through these channels feeds intelligence gathering, while relationships formed create social maps enabling targeted intervention. Vexahai's valve purge technique appears in audit margins noted as productive variance, until overuse triggers supervisor schedule changes and colleague disappearances through misdirected maintenance assignments. Successful cabals discover achievements, create dependencies rather than independence through infrastructure requirements scaling with operational complexity. Sileth's expanding territory demands increased portal access, enhanced broadcast capacity, and specialized services available only through Black Heart subsidiaries. Military success generates administrative burdens requiring technical expertise provided through contracts containing clauses ensuring permanent obligation. Resurrection policies cross-default into Black Heart escrow, while webway encryption keys require quarterly rotations only gate offices can issue, creating service dependencies that transform strength into vulnerability. Technical infrastructure reveals control mechanisms operating at scales beyond individual awareness. Captured suns dim and brighten according to behavioral modification schedules designed to influence circadian rhythms and emotional states, while atmospheric processing introduces chemical compounds affecting decision-making patterns. Transportation networks route traffic according to social engineering requirements rather than efficiency optimization, creating artificial bottlenecks and convenient meetings that appear coincidental while serving systematic manipulation. The soul tax represents more than infrastructure overhead. It functions as monitoring system tracking psychic emanations while generating revenue streams flowing to entities whose ownership structures remain deliberately obscured. Every transaction generates processing fees, service charges, and administrative costs that compound over time, while binding participants to increasingly restrictive terms. Arena subscriptions automatically renew with rate adjustments based on consumption patterns and compliance assessments, treating existence as subscription service, requiring constant payment to maintain access. Financial analysis exposes how dependency tightens hardest where triumph should provide freedom. Essence credit lines float payroll and munitions between raids at rates adjusted by proprietary risk assessments that turn unfavorable after acts of independence. Broadcast access contracts include sub-clauses pegging payouts to compliance with civic harmony advisories, whose definitions shift according to political requirements. The city functions as monopoly utility billing in lives while collecting in futures, a company town where product and consumer represent the same exploited tissue. How deep does this hidden control extend into every aspect of existence, and what mechanisms remain concealed beneath even these revelations? What is the true cost of the immortality Commorragh promises when survival itself becomes commodity requiring constant payment to entities whose identity and ultimate objectives remain systematically obscured? The survival networks dissolve under systematic analysis, their apparent independence revealing coordination too precise for organic development. Behind every shadow market, every protection racket, every informal alliance lies algorithmic management disguised as evolutionary adaptation. What appeared as predatory chaos serves a single architect whose genius transformed desperate refuge into perfect control mechanism. Asdrubal Vecht, who solved the problem of ruling predators by making survival itself a subscription service requiring constant renewal. Resurrection contracts represent the keystone of this economy, their terms binding clients to perpetual obligation through clauses activating across multiple lifetimes. Each death triggers automatic renewal at adjusted rates reflecting compliance assessments rather than simple risk calculation. The procedures themselves require anatomical modifications, creating dependencies on specialized maintenance services, available only through Vecht-controlled subsidiaries. Mis-2 payment cycles and polite letters grow teeth, work details assigned, privileges suspended, sensory allotments throttled until compliance resumes. Some debtors reappear as racks with perfect attendance records, and zeroed account balances, their consciousness preserved, but edited to find fulfillment only, through service to creditors. Pain broadcast networks operate under centralized throttling that maintains artificial scarcity regardless of harvest success. The soul thirst itself has been weaponized through systematic manipulation of feeding networks designed to hold populations at calculated starvation levels, preventing rebellion while ensuring compliance. When raids boom, algorithms' narrow tolerance bands so baseline rises, and desperation resumes at higher pitch. The crystalline conduits carrying psychic emanations monitor consumption patterns while adjusting quality according to behavioral modification requirements. Signal dampers miscalibrate during predicted unrest, while surge pricing follows unpublicized arbitration decisions rather than market demand. Webway access serves as ultimate leverage through monopolistic control of transportation networks, enabling both survival and escape. Portal permits require approval through administrative processes, evaluating loyalty while creating dependencies compounding over operational cycles. Archon Sileth's recent troubles trace directly to permit delays preventing participation in lucrative raids. Her convoy delayed 11 minutes and redirected 7 decks down, changes appearing clerical while serving systematic marginalization. The timing creates competitive disadvantages that compound across seasons, transforming military success into administrative burden, requiring services available only through Blackheart subsidiaries. Apparent enemies reveal themselves as managed competition through conflicts orchestrated according to strategic timetables. Rival cabals operate within parameters channeling ambition into approved directions, while preventing coordination-threatening infrastructure monopolies. Their feuds detonate when surplus runs high and reconvene when inventories drop, the rhythm serving population control while maintaining stability illusions. Arena slot auctions mirror gate permit availability, creating artificial scarcities, forcing cooperation between rivals whose hatred serves systematic purposes through resource allocation and territorial adjustment. Cathis discovers his advancement was engineered when investigation reveals authorization stamps matching seals on permits he never requested. His successful raids generated data improving operational efficiency, while relationships formed, created social maps enabling targeted intervention. The shadow networks offering protection functioned as sorting mechanisms, identifying useful capabilities while containing threats through manufactured dependency. His rise represents not escape ladder, but handle, recognition for utility rather than virtue, advancement serving systematic objectives he cannot perceive or resist. Archon Sileth realizes her independence represents carefully maintained illusion when crisis resolution requires accepting Blackheart credit lines secured against collateral, including gate rights, adjudication votes, and resurrection escrow shares. Each clerical irregularity softened her stubbornness while trimming choices to corridors ending at dependency. Her contingency plans rely on infrastructure controlled by entities whose ultimate loyalty serves interests she cannot identify. Her territorial authority existing at sufferance of systems, requiring compliance with terms adjusting according to performance metrics. Even the homunculi serve contracts. They cannot escape through technical expertise, creating their own imprisonment. Their laboratories require resources available only through approved channels, while research depends on specimens provided through controlled distribution. Patent rights are respected until they are not. One refuses client surrender on lien grounds and discovers missing shipments, unauthorized riots, vaults requiring resynchronization. Their apparent autonomy masks systematic integration into mechanisms profiting from expertise while limiting independence through infrastructure dependencies. The soul thirst weaponization completes the trap through modulated signals engineered to hold citizens half-starved and grateful. Feeding networks do not reflect honest supply, but calculated distribution, maintaining desperation while preventing extinction. Lights dim, not because captured suns flicker, but because policy requires lessons. The hungrier populations become, the more they pay. The more they pay, the hungrier they remain, through tolerance adjustments ensuring baseline dissatisfaction regardless of consumption levels. Vekt's economy of dependence operates through systematic conversion of every necessity into commodity requiring constant payment to maintain access. Freedom exists as product line with automatic renewal. Territorial competition becomes managed market with predetermined outcomes, and immortality transforms into lease agreement with perpetual payment requirements. The city functions as company town, where residents discover employment contracts making them responsible for their own consumption, while binding them to productivity, quotas increasing regardless of performance. What does daily existence mean when freedom itself is commodified, and survival depends on participation in systems designed to consume everything inhabitants produce? How do individuals maintain identity within mechanisms systematically editing away agency, while preserving consciousness to appreciate the transformation? The economy of dependence creates psychological architecture that transforms existence into performance, where authenticity becomes liability and survival requires surrendering the capacity for genuine choice. The revelation of systematic control generates weight beyond simple oppression. Immortality without natural death creates stagnation masquerading as permanence, each resurrection adding layers of compromise that accumulate over centuries until original identity dissolves beneath accumulated necessity. The soul thirst, weaponized through calculated throttling, ensures constant low-level hunger, preventing true peace while driving endless pursuit of sensation that becomes both sustenance and cage. Cathis adapts to his managed role with mechanical precision, concealing profound spiritual exhaustion. Having traced the engineered nature of his advancement, he discards the story that he can climb free, editing his posture and trimming conversations to useful length, while calibrating obedience so precisely that audits read him as furniture. His loyalty shifts from Archon to operational integrity of his own existence, a quiet rebellion of perfect compliance. He learns to study the clockwork behind orders not for rebellion, but for rhythm, recognizing when to volunteer for sorties destined to succeed, and when to absent himself from corridors scheduled for cautionary murders. At night he rewraps wounds as ritual, to quantify time in a life converted to intervals, each successful raid generating data that binds him deeper into systems requiring participation for survival. In arena maintenance tunnels, Vex High and Designation 7749 Tertius develop cautious cooperation, representing one of the rare, genuine connections possible within systematic exploitation. He teaches her to palm resin shards that dull gear tooth bites, saving fighters half minutes of agony, never a full minute, never twice per shift. She learns to recognize equipment failures before they trigger penalties, while he marks hatches, warning of collector nodes behind doors. Their alliance exists neither as romance nor friendship, but as compact of minor mercies, splitting ration bars when hands shake, and burning wrappers before cameras can classify generosity as variance requiring correction. These moments carry profound danger within systems designed to monetize every emotion. Genuine connection creates vulnerabilities that monitoring systems identify and exploit, transforming affection into leverage for behavioral modification. When Vexor High shares extra rations, sensors record transactions, while algorithms calculate optimal intervention timing. The mercy is allowed to stand until it can be exchanged for obedience. He receives transfer schedules sparing 7749 Tertius from purges, but the price becomes signatures on maintenance reports blaming dead colleagues for their own failures. Survival adds weight that never leaves, each act of kindness generating social maps enabling targeted manipulation when compliance requires adjustment. Arkon Silith drafts rebellion with aristocratic desperation, her contingency preparations revealing how thoroughly independence has been commodified. She maps gatehouses and calculates strike windows between audits, counting allies who swear without paperwork while discovering each preparation tightens nets around her. Safe houses are compromised through resurrection, escrow clauses cross-invoked against servant bloodlines. Communication routes collapse when courier. Resurrection riders include service pings, feeding intelligence to security systems. Homunculi promise bespoke reconstitution in legal dead zones, then submit amendments folding sanctuaries into Black Heart jurisdiction with retroactive effect. Her plans accrue liens faster than weapons, while surveillance systems record meetings, and behavioral prediction algorithms calculate optimal responses to various insurgency scenarios. She persists anyway, hoarding refusal like contraband, and having her skin inked with addresses only she can read, hoping parchment cannot be seized if it becomes her flesh. The law contains clauses for that contingency, too. Her rebellion planning demonstrates how resistance becomes participation through mechanisms transforming opposition into useful data, the system profiting from dissent as readily as compliance, while channeling opposition into manageable forms that generate revenue streams supporting infrastructure she seeks to destroy. Immortality without natural endings flattens time into stagnant repetition, where memory becomes clutter requiring artificial spikes for meaning. Citizens chase sharper experiences to feel movement, arenas answering with novelty, covens with new flesh arrangements, cabals with raids exceeding previous yields to satisfy tolerance bands narrowed by policy. Those unable to maintain pace fade at consciousness edges until racks take them gently by hand toward locations where utility can still be extracted. Each resurrection subtracts fractions of self through accumulated compromises, debts, and forced adaptations, original personalities dissolving beneath necessity, while consciousness remains sufficient to appreciate transformation without power to resist it. The psychological toll manifests through behavioral adaptations, sacrificing individual agency for collective survival. Workers anticipate punishment before infractions occur, adjusting behavior according to projected rather than actual threats, while developing emotional detachment, protecting consciousness from trauma. Trust becomes calculated investment measured through survival benefit rather than affection. Everyone learns to count steps, breaths, debts, and intervals between them, transforming existence into arithmetic where miscalculation means disappearance. What the Drukhari have truly lost extends beyond souls into agency itself, the capacity for choice existing independent of systematic calculation. Every decision occurs within parameters, established through infrastructure dependencies and behavioral modification techniques, designed to make compliance appear voluntary while rendering resistance impossible. They retain consciousness sufficient to appreciate circumstances while lacking power to alter them, creating existential weight accumulating across immortal lifetimes, where each choice reinforces systems that enslave them. The city has perfected the art of making victims complicit in their own exploitation through mechanisms requiring participation for survival, while ensuring participation increases dependency. Each resurrection adds contractual obligations, every promotion creates vulnerabilities, and all relationships generate leverage for behavioral control. Citizens discover themselves responsible for their own consumption, while bound to productivity quotas increasing, regardless of performance, transforming existence into subscription service, requiring constant payment to maintain access to life itself. Is there any escape from a system that has made survival dependent on participation in mechanisms designed to consume everything inhabitants produce? What does endurance mean in a place where persistence itself becomes complicity, and where the weight of eternity transforms existence into performance, requiring constant renewal to maintain the illusion of life? The cage rises again through the forest of knives, its bars weeping substances darker than rust, while galleries of pale observers lean forward with practiced appetite. We have witnessed this ascent before, but now the machinery beneath reveals itself, not random cruelty, but systematic conversion, each terror-filled transport representing inventory in an economy that has solved extinction by making survival itself a subscription service requiring constant renewal. The faces tilting in terraces no longer seem chaotic. They follow feeding schedules calibrated across 10 millennia of optimization, their hunger managed through throttled distribution networks, ensuring desperation never quite reaches satisfaction. Commorragh's architecture serves its appetite with mechanical precision, every structural element optimized for channeling suffering upward, while distributing control downward through systems that have perfected predation into perpetual motion. The captured suns pulse with renewed intensity when fed processed anguish, their containment requiring constant nourishment, while artificial illumination makes existence possible. Stairwells miscount travelers according to herding algorithms, doors dilate for those meeting yield thresholds, and elevator systems operate on pain equivalents that literally run on suffering. The soul tax skims every psychic emanation flowing through crystalline conduits, feeding infrastructure while generating surveillance data that maps every relationship, transaction, and moment of resistance for systematic exploitation. The factions perform their competition within rails welded by invisible hands. Gate permits arrive precisely when accounts align with behavioral requirements, while auction schedules mirror resource allocation, serving predetermined outcomes. Archon Silith submits grievances in beautiful calligraphy and receives timing adjustments that appear as mercy while functioning as chains, her military competence rendered irrelevant by administrative delays calculated to demonstrate futility. The cabals compete according to managed scarcity doctrine that prevents genuine threats while maintaining psychological necessity of struggle. Arena slot availability follows permit scheduling, creating artificial bottlenecks, forcing cooperation between rivals whose hatred serves systematic population control. Within this apparatus, survival becomes liturgy, performed with devotional precision. Caithis polishes his splinter rifle by heartbeat count, while Barrack's tones climb and fall in rhythms he has learned to ride, volunteering when permits run hot and developing strategic illnesses, when corridors sharpen toward exemplary punishments. He no longer calls this wisdom. He calls it tomorrow, accepting his managed role with serene compliance that transforms participation into worship of function itself. His morning prayers consist of quota recitations, while evening meditations involve calculating survival probability through performance metrics that measure devotion to systems consuming devotees. In maintenance tunnels beneath arena complexes, Vex High and designation 7-749 Tertius practice small acts of preservation that serve psychological maintenance, preventing complete breakdown. They adjust roller tension by fractions that extend death into artistry, sharing ration bars when hands shake while burning wrappers before cameras classify generosity as variance requiring correction. Their cautious cooperation represents not resistance, but adaptation, finding meaning within meaninglessness while accepting impossibility of escape. The system permits these kindnesses because they lubricate operational efficiency, preventing total collapse of components while generating social maps enabling behavioral modification when compliance requires adjustment. Daily rituals have hardened into worship of the machine's logic through necessity disguised as choice. Citizens recite valve sequences before sleep, not as prayer, but as guarantee that morning will arrive with doors still on hinges. Foremen bleed conduits to keep lifts forgiving, while nobles sign resurrection riders feeling pens pull rather than push. The rules are simple and sufficient. Feed or fade. Everything bleeds eventually. Accept the machine's logic, or be remade into parts that do. Preserve what can be preserved. A finger unbroken, a name remembered without speaking, a breath not spent on screaming. Each generation becomes more perfectly adapted to systematic cruelty through selective pressures, favoring those who excel at exploitation, while eliminating those retaining sufficient empathy to resist participation. Children taken young learn arena geometry before lullabies, growing into performers who die on schedule and resurrect within budget projections. Homunculi apprentices practice consent as contractual clause, while inheriting laboratories shaped by debts older than themselves. Racks teach patience to newly resurrected clients, guiding hands back into gloves they once designed for someone braver. The city perpetuates itself through those it consumes, returning each mouthful as sharper tools optimized for systematic predation. The final survival protocols emerge not as resistance strategies, but as acceptance techniques allowing consciousness to persist while agency dissolves beneath accumulated necessity. Accept the machine's logic because alternatives lead to madness or disappearance through mechanisms that profit from dissent as readily as compliance. Find meaning in small acts of preservation because grand gestures become leverage for behavioral control systems that transform opposition into useful data. Endure without hope of escape because hope itself transforms into commodity, requiring payment to maintain access. Immortality without natural death, creating stagnation, where original identity dissolves beneath contractual obligations, compounding across multiple lifetimes. The cage reaches its destination with textbook precision, while another ascends to take its place, the eternal cycle continuing with industrial rhythm that has persisted for 10 millennia and will persist for 10 millennia more. Clerks weigh terror against fuel requirements, while logging differences as profit margins. Lights rise by calibrated fractions as permits arrive elsewhere, and vendettas pause for advertisement scheduling. Our characters continue along predetermined grooves, Caithis immaculate and tired, Vexhai attentive to steel harmonics, 7749. Tertius counting without numbers, Sileth planning within outlines drawn by other hands. Commorragh has achieved perfect predation through systematic conversion of every necessity into commodity, requiring constant payment to maintain access. The machine feeds on itself while growing stronger, because the diners are also the meal, citizens consuming processed suffering while being consumed by systems profiting from their participation. Each resurrection adds contractual obligations, every advancement creates dependencies, and all relationships generate leverage for behavioral control. The feast is eternal, because hunger never ends. Satisfaction remains impossible by design, and escape requires abandoning existence itself. If you wake here, remember the rules the city whispers through ventilation systems and broadcast networks. Count the valves and keep debts predictable. Share only what you can afford to lose while understanding loss is inevitable. Do not pray for rescue. Prayer becomes invoice. Breathe, work, endure within parameters established for your consumption. You will be eaten with methodical precision. Until then, you remain useful to mechanisms that have made survival dependent on participation in systems designed to consume everything you produce, while ensuring production never satisfies demand. The eternal feast continues. The machine feeds forever,